So after you got to look at the all 22, Tim, what was your takeaway when it came to the performance that you saw from Sunday out of Caleb Williams against the Vikings?
I thought it was good enough to win, right? I think it was good enough to win. I think we handled the pressure really well. I think we actually had a decent pressure plan. Obviously, Ben would have that going into this game. I think we handled it as well as we could. I thought we ran the ball effectively, which is what you wanted to see. Obviously, it was funny because it was one of those that I didn't get a chance to watch live. So when you just watch the film, like it removes the emotion, right? It removes that like, okay, they've scored now. It's like actually substantially easier to consume. What I will say though is, yeah, they did enough to win at the end. Obviously, a huge return from special teams, which was great to see. A little bit of breakdown. We talked about, hey, maybe this Minnesota team is one that's going to give us a couple turnovers. They ended up doing that. I think if there was one complaint I would have, it was red zone execution and specifically low red zone. With that being said, it's I kind of got a lot of the concepts that they were trying to run, and I feel like we were there. We just got to convert them.
Tim, I'm so curious about your perception of what's going on out there, especially you talk about the red zone amongst other things. Here's why. Because I have this like expectation for the number one overall pick to be a certain way, and I'm trying to give the grace, the patience of letting that develop under Ben Johnson. And obviously, like you said, good enough to win. That's like the message from the week. But when Ben Johnson talks about his quarterback missing on some early throws as they take shots, I'm really concerned about his ability to be accurate down the field. Should I be that worried about him being accurate down the field based on what we saw, especially early in that game?
I mean, I think if Ben's pointed out, obviously it's something it's hard for me because it's like, man, I wholeheartedly get the take of like, hey, we got to be more accurate down the field, because I do think even the first one to DJ Moore, it's like DJ's running open on the shot and we sail it. Now, to me, it's like we've got to get the ball out of our hand. We have a free runner coming. We've got to get the ball out of our hand before I can even really assess his angle. That's kind of like my interpretation of it as a former quarterback. With that being said, like, should Caleb be able to, at the point in which he's letting the ball go, assess DJ's angle and realize it's going to be wide open and take something off it? Yeah. Like, to me, that's, yes, he absolutely could do that. I think then there's other ones where it's like DJ was kind of running the shake route where it was he'd work up vertical, he'd break to the corner. It really looked like a sail, almost like a corner stop that the Bears run a lot. And instead, then he'd break it back in. We always called it a shake, where you go to the corner and then back in instead of a, corner post. We just call it a shake. Anyways, he's a little tight to DJ, right? Like, meaning DJ's got to slow up and kind of make one. Now, it still hits him right in the chest. But like, if you're an elite level quarterback, you're kind of holding yourself to a higher standard of, man, I want to be perfectly in front, right? So there, I think, are little things, or the 9 stop where, the corner can then get his hand in on a third down and knock it down. There are little things to tighten up. With that being said, if, I'm evaluating this from Ben's perspective, or if I'm evaluating this from like a coordinator perspective, we are progressing, we are trending in the right direction, which is we are giving these concepts better shots. Like, we're giving them more opportunity to work the concept before we bail out of the pocket, which I think is critical in terms of his growth and this offense's efficiency. And then ultimately, like, listen, we're going to know in the next 3 weeks really quick whether or not we are the benefit of a lighter schedule, or if these structural changes offensively are sinking in. We're going to know in the next 3 weeks whether or not that's the case. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. There are times that I have to remind myself they're 7-3. That's pretty darn exciting, right? Because I do think, like, you want to see more. We all want to score 30 points a game, but it takes what it takes, and they're executing and they're finding ways to win, and they're an actually competitive, gritty team, which is something that I don't think that I can ever remember saying about a Bears team I've covered.
Been a while, that's for sure. And I do want to I want to stay on Minnesota's defense, because they were blitzing like crazy 66% of the time, at least, depending on which place you're looking at for those statistics. But did the Vikings dictate the lack of explosive plays that came out of the hands of Caleb Williams. And as Ben Johnson said, there were plays that he missed down the field, plays that Caleb would probably want back. So what was the reason for low volume in that regard in this particular game?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think one, I think maybe the psychology of why they heated up so much is interesting, because I think the reality is if I were a D coordinator and I'm watching some of these concepts downfield and I'm watching them unfold, I'm kind of thinking to myself, let me blitz. I'm going to heat the Bears up because there's a chance this kid will bail out of the pocket before this concept opens up, which the concept is going to gash us for 40 yards. And then if he gets out of the pocket, I can kind of put it more in a 60-40 scenario of, something going wrong on the scramble drill being the 60% and then him creating a big play being the 40%. So I do think, the concepts that we're running are actually so good to the point that it makes more sense to blitz them, because it's like, let's just not let those develop. Let's put them in a situation where it's maybe lower percentage now, right? I think that's going to be part of Caleb's growth, is staying in there, even if they're bringing 5 or 6 and we can protect it, staying in there. The obvious one to me that he missed was they had this sweet little concept where everyone kind of runs it nowadays. It's called Hank, where you have like a deep Hank 10 yards over the ball. You got double curls. They had a variation of that, but they also had a post over the top. And it's the 14 kid, and he's running wide open, and Caleb's eyes are back there, and then he bails out of there. And it's one of those where it's like, man, if he gives that another click, it was at a point in the game too, where if he completes that and they score, I don't know if Minnesota ever truly gets back into it, because it was one of those that could have potentially, in my opinion, been that that final nail in the coffin. It could have been a game ender. I think that's probably what Ben's talking about. Obviously, there's missed throws. But to me, when I hear Ben kind of talking to the media about hey, things were missing downfield, I think he is on one hand talking about the physical misses. I think there's the mental misses of man, why did you bail out of the pocket here? We know this is a premier look. So with that criticism being said, I also think, again, I want to reinforce, we are trending in the right direction with that. We are nowhere near how bad it was in week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. And it's just something that we're going to have to continue to trend in the right direction and make sure we're giving these concepts a shot. But yeah, there were definitely things on tape where you go, oh, shoot, man, we've got a bigger one if we want it. Now, he's not phantom bailing out of the pocket, right? It's not like he's bailing out of the pocket because, he's feeling something that's not there. There are definitely pushes inside where you got to get out of the pocket, or to him, his instincts say we need to get out of the pocket. This is really funny, and I'm going to go football nerd for a second, which is we actually just had our annual staff. So we had, in my opinion, 15 of the best quarterback coaches across the country, and we were meeting and we were talking. And they were asking me about Caleb, and I was talking about the Bears, and I was talking about this idea of, man, I would struggle to coach this kid in terms of when do you bail out of the pocket? And then we were talking about instincts, and we were talking about this idea of, a kid like Caleb Williams. A lot of our coaches we're coaching for a reason, right? We got let go, or we hit our ceiling, right? We're not as good as a kid like Caleb Williams. But we were talking about this idea of, for us, sometimes it's so easy to work pocket movement and to climb in the pocket, because I had no dream of bailing out of the pocket and outrunning somebody and making a play. So for us, our instincts are, navigate the pocket better. For Caleb, his whole career is basically, his instincts have been bail out of there, because actually that's a better thing for our offense than you trying to navigate the pocket. I think this is the first time in his life where it's been a better thing for him to navigate the pocket versus bail out of it. And then now, how do you properly train those instincts? It's just a fascinating thought process in the world of quarterback development, and specifically for Caleb Williams. And I think a lot of it's going to be not necessarily retraining his instincts, because I don't think you can truly do that, but it's going to be trying to optimize his instincts based on a coverage look, him processing, this is a premier look for this play, so I don't bail. And then if it's any other coverage, I do bail. That's where I think it's going to have to go, which is going to be a lot of work for this staff. With that being said, I think the reward of it with Caleb Williams will be exponentially higher than maybe going and, not utilizing a kid like Caleb Williams and utilizing a kid with a lower ceiling.
We're talking to quarterback expert Tim Jenkins, founder and CEO of Jenkins Elite, here on Rahimi Harrison Grote on 670 The Score. And it's funny, Tim, even in bringing up who you brought up on that Hank concept, 14 is Olamide Zaccheaus, who by watching the tape that Caleb Williams absolutely targeted quite a bit. You know what happened last week where he wasn't blocking well for other people's plays, and that was, I think, reflected in the amount of snaps that he got in this past week. But it's interesting because we talk about how he might have been keying in on him too often, and here's an example of when he should have. And I think that says a lot about what you discuss when it comes to his instincts, not fully knowing yet when to trust them and when not to.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is just, it's like, it's so hard because these situations that we're talking about, these are, half second, like 3/4 second, quarter second decisions, right? They're split second decisions. Like, it's so easy for me to look at the tape and be like, man, we got to rip this post because I'm sitting here and like, I'm not having to process this. And that's where, for me, I think, like, trusting it and letting it rip, and then simultaneously the push-pull of like, shoot, man, DJ Moore had a huge drop. Burden had one that gets punched out, and it's like he's running, and it's borderline, and it's almost borderline a fumble. I'm assuming on the broadcast, it's it's an incompletion, but it's like, how different does this offense look if we just do that, right? And then if we convert a couple of these red zone opportunities, a couple of these turnovers, and then all of a sudden we beat the Vikings 27-17 or 30-17. Like, how different is this narrative? Because right now the national narrative on the Bears, I mean, it's nothing you guys don't know, is that they're 7-3, but they've played nobody and they're going to finish 8-9, right? Like, that's what I think a lot of people outside of maybe Chicago or outside of truly watching them every week thinks. A lot of that was my coaches, right? They're like, hey, are the Bears actually any good? I'm like, well, I think they could be, actually, because this offense can be pretty dynamic, and I think if the defense can force enough turnovers, they got a chance. But again, and kind of like I said in my open, I think these next 3 weeks, we're going to find out in a hurry. If 3 weeks later we're 7-6, this could get dark, right? I don't, if I was a betting man, which I am because I bet these YouTube earnings, I don't think they're going to be 7-6. I think they're going to, I think worst case they're 1-2, best case they're 2-1 in this stretch. And you sit there and you go, man, then you've got a real chance to finish this thing. A lot of it ultimately is going to come down to, is Caleb going to play within the structure of this offense more often than not? And then if it's not that, I think we're going to run into troubles. But if he can trust these concepts and he can turn it free, they've got a real shot to put up some major points against even good defenses, because they had the shots this week against Minnesota. This film was one of those that it wasn't frustrating in the sense that Caleb didn't play poorly. He wasn't spraying the football. He wasn't turning the ball over. But there were opportunities for him to have had a great game, and instead we're walking out of there with a solid game that was good enough to win, which we should not discount. But this game could have been a special game where we're reinforcing the fact that this kid is a franchise quarterback, and instead we're kind of walking out of there with a solid win. But you could easily just look to the other sideline and see, the stat line of 1 touchdown, 2 turnovers is how you get to the fact that the Bears pull this one out.
Tim, I want to ask you this because we discussed this earlier on the show, and you watch a lot of football, you watch a lot of quarterback play, and you've been following Caleb Williams' development so closely, even going back to last year. What do you think the Bears' ceiling is, given what the rest of the division looks like, the fact that they are on top right now, and they do have these games coming up that can decide it? I mean, I want to know, like, where you think Caleb Williams can go between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, well, so Caleb Williams individually, I think the ceiling is really high. Like, I mean, there's not only does he have the talent, the concepts they have, this offense could be explosive. Where I see this Bears team, to me, like, the ceiling is we're making the playoffs. I do not think, and like I hate saying this because like I love the Bears. I want them to be successful as well. I really am starting to enjoy all the Bears community. They're not, like, in my opinion, a serious contender for the Super Bowl this year. The difference between a team like the Bears and the Broncos, I'm covering, in my opinion, 2 of the most fascinating stories right now because people on the national level don't want to think either of them are good. Bo Nix does not have to be as good as Caleb Williams has to be for the Broncos to be a contender.
Yeah.
The Broncos, they can roll out there and they are going to play and again, I feel like I come on here and trash the defense every week. That's also not my intention, but the Broncos defense is completely different than the Bears, in my opinion. The Broncos this last week shut down the Chiefs, which, call it whatever you want. Say the Chiefs are bad this year. They're not. They're going to be an explosive offense. They're going to end up making the playoffs. And the Bears kind of shut down the Vikings, right? Those are two different teams right now trending, and now they have similar records, but I do think those are two different teams. So yeah, I think the Bears are a playoff team at their ceiling. I don't think they can make a serious run until they get better on defense, and I don't know if they can make a serious run at a Super Bowl until Caleb gets to the point where we're coming on here and he's not missing 14 running open. And the reason I say that is because I just think Caleb has to be perfect if this Bears team is going to make a run. Whereas you look at a kid like Bo Nix, he doesn't have to be perfect in order for this Broncos team to make a run. He just has to be good in spots. And the combination of Sean Payton and him have been good in spots to where, they're sitting at 9-2.
Tim, always great to talk to you. I'm looking forward to watching your breakdown on YouTube. You can find that at All Things QB. That is a full film breakdown that Tim Jenkins does. You don't want to miss it. Thanks again.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.